Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Morton. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Artist and Studio Programs here at Baltimore Clayworks, and we are thrilled that you all have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I am joining from my office, located on Piscataway and Susquehannock land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual artist talk given today by Lolo Gem. Lola was born in 1995 in Westchester County, New York. She's a Baltimore-based artist working with painting, ceramic sculpture, drawing, and imagery collage from vintage comic books and early animation. She received a BFA in painting from the Maryland Institute College of Art in 2017 and an MFA in studio art from Towson University in 2025. Her work has been recently exhibited at Towson University, Towson, Maryland, Dickinson College in Carlisle, PA, Blah Blah Gallery in Philadelphia, PA, Art Enables in Washington, D.C., Current Space in Baltimore, Maryland, Del Plain Art Center in Frederick, Maryland, and Gallery CA in Baltimore, Maryland. She is a current short-term resident artist here at Baltimore Clayworks. And for more information about our artist talks, please visit our virtual library at baltimoreclayworks.org and tune in for our next artist talk on Tuesday, December 2nd with Pete Pinnell from 12:30 to 1:30. And I will now turn it over to Lolo.
So I'm just going to walk you through just a little bit of background about myself. And I'm a firm believer that every artist talk needs a picture of you as a kid. So that's me. So I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in a small village called Irvington. It's a suburb of New York City, and it's on the Hudson River. So I got really kind of like great, impactful early exposure to the art scene in New York City through like my middle and high school experience. I got to go on field trips into Chelsea to look at galleries, into artist studios and museums. And that affirmed to me from a pretty early age that I wanted to seriously commit to being an artist. I went to Syracuse University for my first year of college before I transferred to MICA. And I went there because I had and still do have a really big interest in psychology and human behavior. So I thought I wanted to double major in psychology and art and possibly pursue art therapy. But from being there, I kind of quickly realized it wasn't the right environment for me, and I wanted to be in a small, tight-knit community of artists. So that led me to MICA, where I came on board as an illustration major. And I joined in illustration because I had a really deep love for animation and cartoons and graphic novels and comics and just all things narrative storytelling. But I started feeling kind of boxed in that environment and realized that the reason I joined illustration was because of what my interests were. They were because of my drawing sensibilities, my stylistic influences, not necessarily because I wanted to work in commercial art. And at this time, I'm also starting to get exposed to publications like Juxtapose and High Fructose and learn about the Surrealists and the Chicago Imagists and all these artists that are using pop culture and other references that you might not think belong in fine art. And I start realizing that this is allowed in fine art. I just didn't know it yet. So I graduated in painting. I had switched my major to painting and graduated in 2017. And this is a painting that I cannot believe is almost 10 years old now, from my senior thesis, where I was making paintings that were around these like misfit childhood toys, and they were in environments that were kind of unfolding and breaking apart. After graduating, I spent 4 years kind of working various jobs and maintaining a studio practice as best as I could, but kind of felt that I wanted to be challenged again. I wanted to be in conversation with other artists and see how my work could evolve. So that led me to grad school, and I went to Towson University for my MFA, and I finished this past May. So typically, I do identify as a painter, but only now recently self-identify as a painter and ceramic sculptor. And that's what led me here to Baltimore Claywork. So I'm going to walk you through a bit about my painting and my recent body of work and how ceramics manifested into my practice and how I think about sculpture in general. So these are two artists that are two of my favorite painters, Mark Mulroney and Ryan Browning. And these were artists I was looking at when I started in grad school. And something that kind of struck me about their paintings and their image making were these kind of like spliced images that felt like cut pieces of paper. So they have kind of like hard edges, like they might be cut with scissors. Some of them have stylistic differences, like they were pulled from different sources. And that had me thinking about collage. So I also wanted to dive kind of deeper into my love of early cartooning and vintage comics. So that led me to making collages. And I went out and grabbed a bunch of like old Disney and Archie, and I went to thrift stores and comic book stores and just got a bunch of stuff to start cutting up. And I'm really predominantly like referencing this like 1930s to 1960s era. And I just started cutting out things that called to me in one way or another. So, like text bubbles, objects, gestures, and I started collaging these sort of vignettes. And I call them vignettes because they're not like full collages. They have a lot of room left to figure out what might be there. So they became skeletons for my paintings. And through doing this, I kind of noticed a pattern that I was removing the figure a lot from my work. So in these examples here, you see the figure kind of darting out of the frame. Other works might have looked like there was a recent presence kind of swept through, or a figure is committing an action from outside the picture plane. So they're kind of becoming this like ambiguous, spliced narratives that we're not sure what comes before, we're not sure what comes after, and we're not sure who the subject really is. I'm also gravitating towards gestures and disembodied hands a lot. And at the same time, while making these, I'm starting to become really interested in the emotional potency of these collages and the kind of psychological resonance that they're capable of, despite the fact that they're a very simplified cartoon language and that they're missing a lot of context. So this piece here is kind of distilling this scene down into just its most essential parts that kind of deliver that raw emotion. And these collages and these symbols I gravitate towards are starting to become like a vessel or springboards to explore these more complex emotions. And with collaging, over time, I'm starting to become interested in collage as a practice and how it is an intuitive practice that kind of taps into our unconscious mind. So this is, a reason that collaging is really used in art therapy a lot because it taps into that part of ourself that we might not be able to put words to. So the way that we're drawn to certain symbols, the way we recontextualize them, the associations we make, that taps into our unconscious desires, our needs, our histories, etc. So I personally think like cartooning is a really good vehicle for that kind of emotional potency and the kind of connection with the viewer. So this is a excerpt from Scott McCloud's book Understanding Comics, where he's talking about how cartooning promotes universality. So in this example, he's saying the more cartoony an image of a face, the more people it could possibly represent. So realism promotes specificity, where cartooning promotes universality. So it's a form of amplification through simplification. And it's human nature to project ourselves onto images, based on our histories, our needs, and our memories. And this kind of whole aspect is what's becoming really interesting to me, especially as I examine them through the lens of my own parts of myself, my own fears, my desires, my emotions, and those parts of myself that I don't really show to others, or maybe even aren't on my radar at all of my conscious self. So I'm very into psychology and human behavior, and I think that art has a way of tapping into that in a way that's a lot more profound than words. Um, at this point, formally, I'm also starting to become a little more abstracted and more distorted from my original source material. So the image on the left is an in progress shot from my studio, and on the left side, you see two drawings. And what those are basically like iterations away from the initial collage, where it's kind of like a game of telephone. Like each iteration references the last one and things get distorted each time. So that brings me to catching the clay bug, as I like to call it. So during this time, on my own time, I had taken a hand building class with my friend Amy Golden, who's a ceramic artist here in Baltimore, and she teaches a class out of her home studio called Clay Club. And it's really amazing. And I took it 2 or 3 times. I can't quite remember. But I just started getting really addicted to the tactility of clay and also the challenge of like a new medium that has a big learning curve. And I made one vessel and then I made one mug. And then I immediately was like, I want to make sculpture. So I jumped into this ambitious clock sculpture that was based off a drawing in my sketchbook. And when this came out kind of exactly the way I envisioned it in my head, like it had jumped off my page, I considered myself fully infected with the clay bug. And this was when I also first saw the impact that some of my ideas can have when they're rendered three-dimensionally. This clock figure is meant to kind of stir up how you react to the clock as a symbol. So is it a kind of friendly character that's dancing by your side, or is it kind of taunting you? Is it mocking you? Is it maniacally sort of ticking away? And it's a way for me to kind of three-dimensionally render a fear, essentially. It gave me a way to process my own fear and anxiety around the clock and also present it to others and ask the same question. How do you feel when faced with this? And that impact of sculpture was very addicting to me. So hungry for more sculptures, I did an independent study with Rich Holt at Towson, and he helped me create more sculptures and kind of filled in knowledge gaps where I had them. And I started working in grad school for a semester in ceramics. Um, these are some of my like early sculptural influences that I think help contextualize my interests. They're not all ceramic. But to me, these are all like emotive sculptures. So they're all character based or personified in some way. And they feel as though they reference like the absurdity of animation and also like the line work that you might find in comics. But they also feel like really charged with emotion, as well as they feel like they're missing some context, like we're not getting the whole picture. And I like to call this kind of like they sit on the border between clarity and ambiguity, which is something I really gravitate towards. And that narrative ambiguity for me is like initially being pulled from my collage process, pulling things out of context, omitting narrative clarity. But from here, my work kind of starts to begin to follow that idea of narrative ambiguity, where the viewer filling in the gaps is starting to become integral to the work. So, how the scene got to be what it is, the intent or the purpose of the subject, the identity, what might come next is starting to become important. Whoops. So, this is Nerve Tonic, which is one of the sculptures I made at grad school. It's a wall hanging sculpture that was a doozy to get on the wall. My God. And this came from my engagement with those isolated gestures that I was collecting. So this sculpture really highlights my interest in that play of ambiguity and lack of context. So in this piece here, we don't know if this tonic, this nerve tonic, is useful at all. We don't know if it's self-sabotage. We don't know if it's the characters pouring it for themselves or are they offering it to you as the viewer. And if they're offering it to you, is it malicious? Is it a trick? Or is it kind of a supportive gesture? So that ambiguity starts making everything untrustworthy. The other thing I like playing up in ceramics is, I'm rendering something in stone, essentially. So I'm rendering it completely functionless. So this bottle can't actually pour anything at all. Something to note during this independent study too is that I had a limited amount of time. So I kind of hit the ground running with things that were ambitious and things where every sculpture I make, I'm learning something new and I'm trying a new technique. So I wanted to squeeze as much out of this opportunity as possible. So I'm not doing the same thing twice in all of these sculptures. This one's called Whisperer, and this was actually the first piece I made in my independent study. And this goes back to those fearful kind of parts of myself that I mentioned earlier, and that emotional potency that I think sculpture is really well capable of. So there's actually a type of psychotherapy model that I practice and also have a lot of interest in, which is called internal family systems, or IFS. And it influences a lot of my work and just the way I think about how we are, our identities, and kind of our inner worlds in general. In IFS, your kind of whole inner system is essentially made up of these distinct subminds or subpersonalities, and we call them parts. That's why I use the word parts a lot. And they're kind of their own beings. So they're not really like emotions or thoughts, but they're their own inner beings with perspectives, memories, temperaments and jobs, really. So, like an inner critic would be considered a part. And you connect with these parts in like very visual ways. And so, the sculpture, I saw an opportunity to actually like fully realize a part. So, what might it look like if it was in front of me? What shape is it? How does it hold itself? How does it deliver its message? What is its expression like? And this is kind of a manifestation of like a fearful, anxious part that's like nervously prodding at you to warn you of maybe some perceived impending danger. This is one of my favorite sculptures that actually fired here in the wood kiln, which was really, really fun. So it's wood-fired ceramic, and then the chain there is acrylic that I actually like cut up and heat bent into a chain link. And then I made this custom tile pedestal topper for it. And I really enjoyed the trajectory of this sculpture because it kind of evolved and started engaging with different materials when I thought about how it might inhabit a space, when I thought about how it would sit in a room. And wood firing was, really perfect for this because it gave it that aged, rusted metal look. And this sculpture is titled Perceived Threat. So it's symbolizing blurred lines between perceived danger, comfort, and safety. So it's meant to embody like the felt experience of a perceived threat or a fear, where the response to the fear and the legitimacy of that thing in reality might be disjointed. So, this sculpture is playing off like the common cartoon trope of a bear trap as a symbol of danger. So, the same way in like Looney Tunes, you might have like a falling piano or an anvil or a stick of dynamite, those kinds of like absurd things that are just like everyday occurrences of danger. Despite its very convincing materiality, it looks like rusted metal. Upon closer look, it's kind of lumpy and the teeth are very dull and useless. And it's evident that it probably couldn't harm anything at all. So it's kind of blurring those lines of danger and safety and putting the legitimacy of everything into question. I'm also beginning to think about ways that ceramics could actually be a part of my paintings to enhance the narrative or a feeling or a tone of the piece. And in this work, the ceramic is kind of heightening the importance of this one little measly water drop that these flowers are kind of like thrashing and begging for. And, it's highly seductive. It's more seductive in person, but I have like a mother of pearl luster on it. So it's really like catching light. But again, it's also functionless. So like it can't fall. If it did, it would just break. In this piece, I'm adding ceramic as kind of like fallen confetti as if it fell out of this piece. So I actually painted these in acrylic to be like the exact colors in the painting. And here the ceramic confetti is kind of like personified again. So it's like slumped and kind of feeling like it's tired or worn. And then this is Brain Dump. So this is a sculpture where my goal for myself was I wanted to see what would happen if I approached sculpture like a painting and also like a collage. So I was sort of building and adding forms and moving the clay around in a way that was much more intuitive. So I wasn't building based off of a plan I had, but I was kind of putting it together like I would a painting, like the way I would think about a painting. And this piece has like past symbols from old work that were all symbols of like frustrations or anxieties or fears. So there's alarm clocks, there's spilled paint, there's like a pencil, speech bubble. And I chose this kind of like overall busy glaze for it because I wanted it to require looking up close to actually see what the objects are. So thinking about like what would it actually look like if we could closely inspect all of the things that are weighing us down or all of the things that are overwhelming us, like what do they look like and what forms do they actually take? So I think a lot about ceramic in this way and sculpture in general of kind of being able to confront and externalize internalized fears or internal feelings or emotions. In ceramic, you have this interesting ability to like make it real and make it almost like fossilized. So that leads us to here in the present at Baltimore Clayworks. And I applied to this residency as a way to continue exploring clay and continue trying new ideas and new things. And my goal here, really, like to be totally honest, is to just not second guess myself. I want to make the things that I want to see realized and feel excited by, and not question or doubt whether it's worth my time to make it. I can easily think myself into a hole. So my goal is kind of just to make as much as I can and make what I'm excited about. So on the left there, that little devil head is the first sculpture I made here, and I sculpted it on my second day right after moving in. And it was based on a sketch in my sketchbook. And I kind of just wanted to, I knew I needed to just start something. Otherwise, I would just think and think and think and not start anything. So I just flipped through my sketchbook and I was like, yes, I like that. Let me just sculpt that. And also kind of get my hands dirty again and remind myself how to hand build and work with clay. And I'm really happy with how that one turned out. Um, but on the right there, that fortune teller. So coming in, the idea I had coming in was I wanted to work with themes around reassurance seeking and chasing answers and pursuing like fortunes or predictions. And this had me thinking about all the ways that this like manifested in childhood. So paper fortune tellers, magic eight balls, games of MASH where you like make your perfect future for yourself. And I was thinking about how that also differs from what we might do in adulthood. So, like in adulthood, we might seek out self-help books or other items or vices that kind of promise this sort of fix or this answer to your problems. So this piece is modeled off from those paper fortune tellers. I used to make these a ton when I was a kid to like predict the future for myself and for my friends. And it's distorted in scale and it's personified in this way that it feels like it's kind of slumped again and tired, like it's used or discarded, kind of like it served its purpose, or maybe its playfulness has been forgotten. In the same way, I'm also working on a magic eight ball, kind of deflated and functionless and used and kind of discarded. And this is also a black clay body, which I'm really excited about. So I haven't tried that before. So I'm looking forward to how that comes out. But something I like about the eight ball and the fortune teller also is that they're objects where I could keep shaking the eight ball and maybe get the answer I want or the answer maybe I'm like seeking. And all these like kind of childhood objects, I look back at them with like nostalgia, but also this kind of like a little bit of like sadness, like a little bit of grief and admiration at the same time. And I feel like rendering them in ceramics, they're now fossilized like these relics and they're frozen in time. And this is my current like big undertaking. I have since worked more on it since this picture, but it's wrapped up really tightly and I want to let it sit for a little. But I'm playing with some imagery from old work that I find resonant. So that splice of painting up there is from 2018. And I kind of just wanted to resurface that imagery, again, almost akin to like a collage practice, and make this big gravestone with this for rent sign slapped to it. And I'm thinking about clocks being on it, and like band-aids and wilted flowers. Um, so this is a big undertaking. It's the biggest I've ever worked, and I'm really excited about it, and I hope it survives. But with this experience, I'm also chasing experimentation. I'm chasing exploration. I think the only way that we can grow as artists is to keep evolving. So I'm trying lots of new clay bodies, working out of my comfort zone, and just seeing kind of what sticks. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity and the being involved in the Baltimore Clayworks community. It's been like a very fulfilling experience so far. So I just want to say thank you and thank you for having me. And that's my contact info if you want to chat.